Today on the Voice of College Football, West Virginia channel, we're doing a Towson preview against the West Virginia Mountaineers with Mike Asti of WVSportsNow.com. Stay tuned for an exciting broadcast. What's up? Welcome in, Mountaineer fans. My name is Mountaineer Paul. Today we're going to do a preview, a double shot, West Virginia versus Towson. I have a guest for you today. It's somebody that you probably heard of, Mike Asti. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, how you doing, man? Yeah, happy to be aboard. How you doing?
Doing well. Doing well. It's a reset button game for the Mountaineers.
Yeah. Yeah, to say the least, obviously. I mean, it's a must-win game, but it's a physical reset button, a mental reset button, and they just kind of need to show what they can do in a game that everyone's expecting them to win. There's not even a spread. I mean, it's Towson. It's coming to Morgantown, but we've also seen in college football that some programs that have a lot of history that maybe are down and out right now that you thought, okay, they're struggling. They're not where they once were, but they're not going to lose that game. And then you see Nebraska lose to Georgia Southern. You see Texas A&M ranked 6th at the time. They lose. Obviously, Notre Dame losing to Marshall, maybe a little better than FCS, but still shouldn't be losing to Marshall. So it can happen to anybody, but it's an important time to regroup and play really, really well. And I think also, which we'll touch on here, but I also touched on WV Sports Now for us, that they got to do more than win for me. They can't just win that game by a couple touchdowns, even 3 touchdowns. They got to show up, show out. They got to fix some things that were problems last week. They got to have the defense play really, really, really well, even better than against Pitt, obviously. Granted, that was good. Way better than against Kansas. More from the running game, more from the O-line. The offense obviously is clicking, but continuing it. And they need to do all of that against Towson. And then a short week with a quick turnaround for Virginia Tech on the road. They beat them last year. I don't think Tech's that good, but that's going to be really, really tough in Blacksburg. And obviously West Virginia can lose to anybody. So they got to be really mentally focused for that one as well, which means getting through this, not overlooking this. But it's going to be tough. The next 6 days, they're going to play a couple games, and one of them will be on the road that'll be really, really tough. And now they're coming off the loss to Kansas.
I couldn't agree more. And a lot of FBS talent on this Towson roster, looking up and down it, even a draft pick along that defensive line. I'm really interested to see, like you said, the attitude of the Mountaineers. I don't think any of the kids have given up yet. That's not the vibe I've gotten from social media. Right. You hear head coach Neal Brown talk about the advice they've given the players is just to turn off social media right now, which I think is probably for the best. I did a video yesterday. It was a little bit of a public service announcement to our fans because I saw some guys targeting kids on Twitter. I'm not a fan of that.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think they, in my opinion, shouldn't be directly targeting them. I'm okay with the coaching staff being targeted, but these are kids that they're playing for our university. They're giving their hearts out.
Yeah.
So that's not conducive to helping anything. If we, the fans, can help with anything, it should be edifying players and not tearing them down.
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely. It never. I mean, it's one thing if you're doing it to pro athletes, but it's still annoying, honestly. In general, if you, the fan, and media members sometimes do this, which is then even more ludicrous. But if you're going at an athlete and directly tweeting them and threatening them, it just doesn't help anything, and it makes you look really, really bad. They obviously, generally speaking, know they're sucking if they're not playing well. I don't think, and Neal Brown touched on this after the game, it's not good enough, and nobody knows it's not good enough more than Neal Brown and the team. JT Daniels talked about the dumb mistakes. They're well aware of it, and that's a guy who actually played well against Kansas. And it's no way to say that Neal Brown is void of criticism. I've criticized him. This is year 4. If they have the type of year that some national experts are saying, like ESPN saying they're not going to win any other games besides Towson, if they go 1-11, and you could argue this being the worst year in program history that's over a century plus old, then yeah, you might have to cut bait regardless of what the buyout is. And some are already thinking that. It's not like you can't criticize, but a personal shot, personal insult, and pure attacking doesn't help. It sucks for pros, but yeah, for college kids, they're not. I mean, yeah, there's NIL deals now, so many of them are getting some money, but it's not like a coach. They're not maybe fully an adult to that level. So no, it's crazy. But yeah, it's Towson. Now Towson was 4-7 last year, so it's not like you're facing Appalachian State, who year in and year out is a really, really solid FCS competition that, you know, someone argue should be higher, and they've been ranked before. That's not this team. This probably is more comparison to when WVU played LIU, and against LIU was 66-0. Yeah. And I'm not going to say they're going to beat them down that much against Townsend because there are a lot of transfers there, but it should be a several touchdown win, and you'll want to get up early and then bury them. They actually blew a 2-touchdown lead against Kansas.
Yeah, I was surprised. I felt really good after that 14-0 lead that we went up with, and then we couldn't allow a possession. It was like Kansas got rolling, and then it was a shootout. So we had a 2-possession lead. They stopped us once. That's nullified. They score, it's tied, and then you're trading. And then it's who makes a mistake first. And unfortunately, we've made more mistakes than they did, several more, which has kind of been a theme these first 2 games of the season, which comes back to coaching. And as big of a Neal Brown guy as I've been and some other guys on this channel have been, we want to win and we love this team. It's cool, and so, there's a personal aspect of it that I try to separate, especially when I do these videos, but it's really hard.
Right.
So some of that is going to leak in, and it's just how it is, So looking up and down the Towson roster, I see some familiar names. Actually, a couple kids that West Virginia recruited, some 3-star guys I see on their roster. I don't know how much of they played into the Towson equation yet this year.
Yeah.
But Pigram is a guy that is well known. He's a 7th-year senior, so he's been around. I don't think there's anything that we can throw at him that is going to throw him off. And I mean, to be honest, I don't know. From the way things have looked, I don't even know what our kids can handle, especially on the back end as far as a complicated scheme.
Yeah.
Even as far as the head coach Neal Brown talking about position changes, which that's scary in my opinion. I've heard names like Tyreek Austin Cave get thrown out there. Obviously, X-Cree Lowe's been in the program forever. He might man the middle.
He brought up Martin. He brought up Sean Martin playing really, really well, and literally said that he deserves more playing time. So I'd imagine he's going to give him more playing time. And one thing Neal Brown also touched on, which I've touched on my shows, and I think is clear here, that it's possible, and maybe this is a glass half full take. I'm not saying I have it, but maybe this is a glass half full take. It's possible the Kansas matchup was just really, really bad. And that might be why you saw the defensive effort different from the Pitt game to Kansas, because Pitt, they're a better team. They're certainly better than Kansas. They were the defending ACC champ, and you have a new quarterback, a new offensive coordinator in there, but they were better than WVU. They were supposed to win the game. WVU was the underdog, but West Virginia covered that spread. Many Mountaineer fans, even Pitt fans, have told me they think West Virginia should have won that game. That pick at the end, the 4th-and-1 call. Yeah, there's controversy at the end. A lot of different things WVU could have won, and it's because of 5 sacks at Keaton Slovis. Dante Stills almost wrecked the game by himself, and the defense played really, really well. And Charles Woods played in the game, but he left early, so you didn't have him against Kansas, but you barely had him against Pitt, and the secondary still didn't break too much. Pitt scored 40+ last year, and they were held down to less than that in that game, again, in the backyard brawl. So it could have been a matchup, because you're looking at more of what West Virginia fans are more used to over the last couple decades. Pat White, Rasheed Marshall, that whole day with Rich Rod of that spread offense. Kansas runs something similar with Jalen Daniels and those legs that he has, able to scramble out. So West Virginia was kind of bit by what the fan base had been used to prior to Dana Holgorsen and Neal Brown. And it just appears that maybe the defense isn't capable of handling RPOs. Neal Brown said that they were out of position. They were on the wrong side at different times, little things that sound minute, but that's what caused big plays and allowed Kansas to really dominate, almost 90 yards rushing for a quarterback. That's going to be a problem, even if he doesn't throw tons of yards. So it could have been that was a really, really bad matchup, and this would be a better one. Maybe even Virginia Tech will be a better one. Maybe even some conference games will be a better one. I don't think they're going to face a QB that'll be that solid running the rest of the year. Not that it's an excuse. We're still talking Kansas here, who's been the worst Power 5 in the last 10 years, even if they're better and they do have veterans there. But I do a show with Rasheed Marshall, and that's exactly what he brought up. He immediately said, I know that offense. I've done it before. That QB, I could tell he's going to feast against this defense because they weren't handling the RPOs, and I myself would have done the same thing. So it could have been matchup that was the problem. But I will say, in response to kind of what you're talking about with Neal Brown, and as much as now in year 4, I do think it's kind of put up or shut up, and you do have this being a results-based business. So we're sitting here talking at 17-20. There's not really a big win there. You can point to Virginia Tech. They were 15th ranked at the time when you brought their rivalry back, but they lost 4 out of the next 5. They just really weren't that good. They weren't ranked. I don't even think they're that good right now. They haven't been great for a while. So is that really a big win? He's been really, really close in a lot of games that could have been big wins. Yes, he won the bowl game during the COVID year, and that was against the good Army team. But again, outside of the bowl game, are there any really big wins? Or not really. The team has gone from struggling that first year, but okay, the cupboard was bare. Some in media called it year 0 after Dana. That's fair. You get the COVID year, you go to a bowl game and win. People think, okay, now the program's climbing. And then you regress last year where, they crawl in a mediocre bowl game, but it felt like they won 3 games. Those games were just boring. They weren't good. The offense couldn't put points on the board, and you're an offensive guru. And then this year with this just horrendous start, this is the first time the program's been 0-2 since 1979. We're talking a long time, man. That's before I was born. So it's been a long time, and that's what's really, really bad about this. So it feels so bad, and the recruiting class is coming in. That's going to be nice. It is supposed to be a good top 30 recruiting class, at least top 35, where it will fall. But nobody cares about that. But one thing he has done well, which is why I think some fans and media even still want to defend him. I know a lot of former players have DM'd me, and they're kind of jumping off the ship. But why everyone liked him right away is because immediately he brought the family atmosphere back, immediately connected to the past again. I have former players told me directly. Mike Logan told me directly when I was covering the Steelers. Rasheed Marshall's told me this. A lot of former players have told me this, that they didn't feel welcome at the program under Dana Holgorsen for whatever reason. I'm not going to get into things with Dana, but they didn't. And I don't know if they were directly told they can't go there, but they didn't feel welcome. I mean, Mike Logan lives in Pittsburgh. Rasheed Marshall lives in Pittsburgh. These guys aren't far away. So to not be welcome at the program is crazy. And you look at McAfee, you look at Noah Devine, they went to the brawl. Yeah, the brawl is a big deal. McAfee talked about that. He didn't feel welcome at the program since he missed those kicks in 13-9. He missed those kicks, but that's insane that you wouldn't welcome him back to the program with what he was there, the best kicker ever. Obviously, a great NFL career, was a punter in a Super Bowl, a kickoff specialist in a Super Bowl, and then what he's doing in media now. So to not make him feel welcome until a road game is a little nuts. So, so those things are all great. He says and does all the right things. He's a really nice guy. Don Nalen loves him. Fans, media, everyone loves him. The fan base loves him. He welcomes everyone back. It is what it should be for the 15th winningest program of all time, and it helps recruiting. Maybe that's why he's recruited really, really well, even though the team hasn't been winning. But if you don't win, you don't have the big win, doesn't matter, unfortunately. It just, all that doesn't matter if you just don't win more games. And the buyout might be too big that they're going to let him go the rest of the season, maybe even next year. But eventually, you got to cut bait if you're not winning any games. If you go to 19-30 or something wild, eventually you got to stop the bleeding and move on, especially when the program is eventually going to probably have to audition to either be the top dog in the Big 12 if things stay the way they are and you add the new teams. They don't want to be bottom feeders in a conference that might not be Power 5, or if they really want it in another conference and they need to get in another conference. They're mostly selling how good of an athletic program they are and how many fans they have, and they are a great athletic program. Basketball, volleyball, obviously the Olympic sports, football, etc., bringing tons of eyeballs and interest with the fan base. But if the team's not winning and so bad, that's the major driving force. It's all about football for conference realignment. And not that you're going to lose fans, but you're going to be less attractive. So the only change then you can make is at the head coach position.
Agreed. I like the point you made there. The last time I can remember us having trouble against the mobile guy was Gary Bohannon last year against Baylor. it's definitely something that's come up. And so, to your point, I hope you're right. And I honestly, I mean, who am I to argue it's Rasheed Marshall? If he said that was going to feast against that defense, he's probably right.
Yeah.
And it's a really good point. And obviously,
he did say it in retrospect, not before the game. So I'm not going to give him credit for predicting it, but he did say it in retrospect. Yeah.
That's a good point, too. Did you watch Dana Holgerson's press conference this week on Kansas?
No, I did not.
He really, I mean, of course, Dana, from what I remember, always had good things to say about upcoming teams.
Right.
But he, with conviction, said, listen, this is not the Kansas team I've seen. Coach Leipold's done a good job.
Yeah.
And he said they're a problem. He talked about the scheme.
That's the word Neal Brown used. He literally said that I knew they were going to be a problem. So he used that same word. And
same deal with Dana. And I've never really heard Dana sounds worried. And it's funny how he's talking to the Houston media out there right now. He kind of throws out Big 12 preview. That's what he keeps saying.
Right,
he's like, yeah, we'll get to the conference stuff, but this is our Big 12 preview. And I got a chuckle out of it. I kind of missed Dana's press conferences. He was such a I don't want to say Bill Belichick because he has a little more personality, but it has that kind of vibe to it, to where he can take or leave you. He gets a little snippety sometimes. So, but yeah, so he had some good things to say about Kansas, and maybe we look to the end of the year, and Kansas was a lot better than a lot of us thought they are.
It could be, if they win 8 games, that's the thing. If you need to really root for Kansas now. if Kansas wins 7 games, even that's even a low bar for a turnaround to make this better and put lipstick on this pig. If Kansas gets in a mediocre bowl game, it's been better than what it's been at Kansas, but I don't think that would defend losing when you're a 13.5-point favorite and you're West Virginia. If Kansas gets 7 or more wins, certainly if they get 8 wins, and as much as everyone makes fun of them and puts them in all the rankings as the worst Power 5 of the last 10, 20 years, they do have an Orange Bowl appearance in the last couple of decades, and that was a rare year that nobody expected. That's really the only argument against them being the worst Power 5. However, if they do that again, then or do close to it and get 7+ wins, certainly 8+ wins, it would make it look a lot better. Now, obviously, if West Virginia doesn't win any games, it's just going to make West Virginia, they're just a bad team and Kansas won, and maybe they should have won bigger. Maybe they shouldn't even have needed overtime if they end up having that year. But if West Virginia has, a regular year, maybe they crawl in a bowl game as well and kind of fix things. Maybe they upset somebody else. And then Kansas has that special of a season, then it'll make it look better. Absolutely. That might be a selling job for Neal Brown in an end of season meeting with Shane Lyons to say, look, they beat more than us. This was a really good Kansas team. Can't lose to them, but it was a good Kansas team. We won these other games. We have this recruiting class coming in. Might make some fans feel better. But and it's also when you have a team that's been bad for so long, but then has a veteran. You have a veteran at QB. You have a veteran coaching staff. You have veteran players there. They can all of a sudden have a really good season. So maybe this could happen for Kansas. It'll be interesting what that matchup there is with Houston is like, though, because Houston's coming off struggling a little bit. They've been a sexy pick prior to the season. They're coming in the Big 12. It's all about offense for them. So I'd imagine maybe Dana's even kind of excited. That's going to be a shootout game again, probably. Can they handle Jalen running around? It probably will be over under that. It's going to be close to 100 points again. Kansas is probably going to have to throw up 40+ again in order to win that one. So we'll see what happens. But it could be that. When I first heard it, it felt like Neal Brown trying to make excuses for the game a little bit, even though he did say it wasn't good enough and didn't want to make excuses. But to have Dana say the same thing, it also could be that he wants to, as you know, these coaches also they are conscious of the narrative, and they are, Belichick does this a lot. A lot of coaches do this a lot. Mike Tomlin does this a lot. They're never going to say anything but the opponent they're facing is the greatest. Bill Belichick during the dynasty of the Patriots, before every game, oh man, real big problem with Jacksonville coming up. It's like, come on, Bill. They're a 3-win team. You're in the middle of a dynasty. Then you're not going to really worry about this game. But they're always going to sell that, so that if it goes off the rails, it's not looking like they're not prepared. So maybe Dana wanted to make sure fans of his team realize, hey, we just saw what happened. If that happens to us, it's not like we suck. That's just the situation with the opponent. So we'll see.
So I want to talk about Towson just a little bit, just a few things that I found interesting about their team. Offensive line, they've got a true freshman on the left side, 6'8", 280 pounds. What's interesting about it is on the right side, they have a right tackle and they have a swing guy, and this is courtesy of Mike Anderson, Chris Anderson, and Mike Casaza. I heard them talking yesterday, and apparently the two guys on the right side, even though they're seniors, have twice as many pressures as this freshman. Unfortunately, his name slips my mind at the moment. On the left side is a 6'8" kid. I found that to be interesting. I don't think that's going to determine the game at all, but I did label this as a Towson preview, so I did want to talk about them just a little bit.
Sure.
At the quarterback spot, they've got Matthews, Hunter, and Reynolds. But Pigrome through 2 games has been their leading rusher. He went for 124 last week on 15 rushes, 137 yards, a couple touchdowns through the air. So obviously he does have that dual threat. I wonder if they do run a similar scheme to Kansas, but they don't have the talent at every spot. So I wonder, if this will be a figuring out process again this week. Obviously, we out-talent them at almost every spot. I can't imagine that even though there are some FBS transfers there, they wouldn't be at Towson almost in every case if they were cream of the crop guys. There are other Group 5 schools and even other FCS schools that would want a kid. These are I don't have a clue. I don't know if these are high character kids or not.
I don't know them personally either, but also you would have a situation with the way the transfer portal is and how wide open it is. I mean, West Virginia got a guy from North Dakota State who won championships there, and then now he's a part of West Virginia. So after a certain point, if you're a veteran on Towson, you probably would have been able to transfer to a bigger school. You probably would have been able to get the FBS level, especially since you wouldn't have to sit out these days. So I'd imagine, they would have taken advantage of those opportunities. Some coach would have offered them something. They would have saw some scholarship opportunity. We'll see what scouts say, obviously, going into the draft. If any of them get those looks, I highly doubt it. I'm not going to pretend I can analyze Towson that way. What I will say to come back at Towson, though, they have a veteran group that could make you wonder, maybe mobility at QB. We'll see what happens offensive line-wise. This got to be a battle in the trenches, though, that West Virginia has to maul them. Dante Stills and the defensive line need to make this clear early on. They're not going to win this game. And what should happen in a game like this, especially with Virginia Tech coming up in a big road game on a short week, and maybe it's different because you're 0-2, but the ideal thing when you see Towson on the schedule, when they're on the schedule, and the benefit of maybe playing Pitt right away, and then you throw this game middle of that first quarter of the season instead of being the first game, is West Virginia should have enough of a lead that we should see maybe Nico, maybe more of Garrett Green with some packages to actually throw and not just be a runner. Ideally, probably, I've seen a lot of fans, every article I put up, what do you want to see out of the Towson game? They do want to see Nico in the second half. There should be enough of a lead that JT Daniels should not be playing all the way through this game. If he's playing in the fourth quarter, you got some problems. So that is one thing that should be able to be utilized in this game, especially when, and everybody knew JT was going to start the year as the QB1. That's why he transferred there. But if you're having a competition, if you're saying you like the future, if you do bring in a top-level recruit, and even though he's not going to play for this year, maybe next year because you have a transfer, if you want to still make him happy, you don't want to lose him to the transfer portal, you want to have him be the future, you want to showcase that, etc. You even want to tell Shane Lyons, hey, we got it good for the future here. This is an opportunity to play him some. So that all got to happen. And then just also looking at Towson's previous games, by the way, even though they're better probably than what they were last year at 4-7 with more of an experienced team, you're looking at 14-13 over Bucknell to start the year. You're looking at 29-21 over Morgan State. I mean, against their similar level teams, they're not dominating. Right. In that level against those teams, the Appalachian States of the world are destroying those teams. And then there's a whole argument of what would they do with a full schedule like a West Virginia has or in a major conference. I don't think they do nearly as well, but they're at least roughing up those type of teams. That's not even the case for Towson here. It's never been the case for Towson here. So again, it should be a game that if West Virginia does not win the game by at least 3 scores, there's probably a problem. If you see JT Daniels in the fourth quarter, there's probably a problem. I'm not saying it got to be 66-0, but you need to win. You need to win big, and the defense needs to show up, and the defense needs to play well. So I'll even flip it. That was a shutout against a lower-level team a year ago, which is the best offensive output Neal Brown's ever experienced at WU, and what is that saying against that competition? But West Virginia needs to win big by at least 3 scores. You need to see someone other than JT in the second half, certainly fourth quarter, and the defense cannot allow more than probably 10 points. I mean, I'm not requiring a shutout here. Maybe 14 is at the most if it's garbage time and you're really up by a lot, and maybe some of your starters are out. Maybe Dante Stills isn't playing in that second half because you can't lose anybody else with Charles Woods already hurt. But it got to be convincing and on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, you mentioned Charles Woods, and unfortunately, he's had surgery.
Yeah.
For the people watching that know that, possibly one of the better corners in the Big 12. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see him really perform that out on the field. He did all he did last year, but I really wanted to see him put 2 good seasons together, and unfortunately, not sure exactly how long he's going to be out. Do you have?
They're just saying indefinitely. To be honest with you, it doesn't appear they want to make it too clear. When you have a surgery, I cannot imagine he's coming back this year, especially if the season is going off the rails. Like, what are you bringing him back for if you already lost 8 games and you have a couple left? However, Neal Brown said just the other day in the press conference before we learned of the surgery that he would miss the Towson game. He had missed the Virginia Tech, or he had missed the Kansas game, missed the second half of the brawl, and we'll reevaluate him prior to Virginia Tech, and we'll do it week by week. That seems ridiculous. That seems unlikely and just not happening now after surgery, certainly. So I would definitely say he's not playing against Virginia Tech. But it was also a change from the week earlier because leading up to the Kansas game, he didn't have an update. He literally said there is no update right now, and that was after the brawl. So it didn't look good then. There was no update. You got to figure there really was something he knew that he didn't want to tell people. But then he was quick in the beginning of this week to say he is definitely out for Towson. You also don't know at the time if he before surgery, if that was just, if he's not fully healthy, why waste him against Towson, even though the team is 0-2. Yeah, immediately. But now that there's surgery there, that might be totally wrong. And maybe he just never was going to play. He probably is out longer. The word, though, is just indefinitely, which is very vague. And I personally would say he's probably missing at least 3 to 4 weeks. Would be surprising prior to that. If they somehow turn this around and string some wins and get an upset win here or there in the Tech game or even in the Big 12 schedule, maybe he'll try to come back later. He's on a lot of watch lists. He's going to want to do that. But his absence has been felt and is a really, really big deal. He's the only veteran who knows the system has been there from the secondary. And before the year, I said that JT Daniels, Dante Stills, and Charles Woods, if this team has a great year like some fans thought they would, and I thought maybe honestly 6-7 wins is more realistic than a lot of fans saying 9+. But if that was going to happen, you couldn't lose JT, Dante, or Charles Woods for any significant period of time. Now Charles Woods was in that group. And you could argue him even being more important than Dante Stills because you didn't have any other veteran presence in the secondary that had been at WVU. So he's now been lost. We'll see. That's not a good enough excuse to say why you lose to Kansas, and certainly wouldn't be an excuse against Towson in one man. But, yeah, it's a hit. And I'd imagine weeks, if not the season.
Completely agree. And, it does give some younger guys to come in. We hear Jacoby Spells right out there, Mamu Ben Wahad. Somebody's going to have to do it. Somebody's going to have to step up. They're playing around with some lineups. I'm sure there's some things we don't even know about yet. Yeah. Looking forward to seeing. Probably won't see it against Towson if they are playing around with something.
Yeah, shouldn't have to open up the playbook against Towson, right?
But I would say lineups will be definitely something to watch at. Who is out there? Who is playing? Yeah. I've heard Nico a few times, though, going back to that. Graham Harrell brought him up. Neal Brown brought him up unprovoked in his press conference. I think somebody was talking about it wasn't offense. So – and Neal Brown brings up Nico. Okay. So, I've heard his name a lot. I don't know, the quarterback order. You're more connected than I am. Do you want to make a prediction on it?
Officially, JT1 and the rest of them are or. There officially is not a depth chart beyond, and the all of football camp prior to Backyard Brawl, they all were or. So I know some fans were confused, where their names are after JT Daniels is not an official depth chart. They're all or. It's either alphabetical order or just thrown at the wall. It doesn't matter. They're all or. But I'd imagine Nico's probably more likely to play in this Towson game. I think, from what I've heard and kind of being around football camp, if this team was having a good year and JT got hurt, I'd be more tempted to believe that maybe Garrett Green would come in just because Nico's so young and inexperienced. They wouldn't want to risk rebuilding if the year was going well. And now that, granted, last year, Garrett Green did come in at times, but they were all run packages. Even if he threw, it was an accident because he needed to try to make something happen. It wasn't impressing anybody throwing, and he hadn't done enough to show Neal Brown that he could be a thrower to ever be considered really for the starting job. So I don't think he was ever considered for that. I am shocked he didn't transfer because I heard multiple times last year that he was literally skipping classes in the middle of last season. Like a game they would lose that he thought he should have won, and he literally wouldn't go to class the next week. I did hear that. So that makes you believe that he's unhappy and he's looking to transfer. The way the portal is, he could have easily got out. You'd think some team maybe would have at least thrown him on there and given him more PT. But I'd imagine he's more the backup if you want to win the game and the season was going well. Now that they're 0-2, I'd imagine Nico's more likely to go in unless they turn the ship around. And for this Towson game, I don't think there's any reason to play Garrett Green over Nico. This should be all about the future.
No.
So I'd imagine Nico is more likely to play in this game. Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean that in Virginia Tech, in Blacksburg, if JT would get hurt, then I wouldn't be surprised if Garrett Green doesn't get in before Nico, because that's a game they want to win, and that you're not rebuilding in that game. You want to do it now. But for Towson, 100% Nico if JT's out of there.
Completely agree. All right, Mike Asti, I want to know what you think the score is going to be. Let's. I was actually able to find a spread.
I couldn't find one for a while.
37.5 is what Towson is getting for this game.
Okay.
So give me a prediction over 37.5, under 30 or 37.5, and I'm assuming you think West Virginia is going to win the game.
That would be a hot take. West Virginia is going to win this game. West Virginia will win this game. It'd be funny, but I'm not going to do that. West Virginia will win this game. That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of a spread, I will say. And to compare last week for a ranked game, for a ranked team now that they're ranked, who knows how good they are. But Penn State, they had, I think it was like a 40-point spread or something like that. I didn't think they were going to cover that. They ended up really beating Ohio by even more than the spread said. So they did. And you go back to LIU, 66-0. The spread was similar to this, and obviously West Virginia won by 66 and allowed nothing against them. So they certainly covered the spread, if not doubled the spread. 37.5 is so big. That's such a big spread. I'm going to just say, and I would not advising betting on this game anywhere. Any of the official books I haven't seen even give this a spread. I don't know where that was from, but it makes sense. I'm going to say West Virginia doesn't cover the spread for the only reason of they're going to be up enough. I do think you'll see Nico in the second half. I do think Dante Stills will leave this game. I do think they'll be able to put in a lot of the second string or third string or whatever the case may be in that second half. Against LIU, it was similar a situation here. They were really trying to just run up the score because they wanted to show what the offense could do. Daggy played, I believe, into the third quarter in that game. I don't think that's happening here because I think JT's been a guy that's been hurt his whole career. And even though if you hear him in the press conference, I'm not going to say in any way he's selfish, but he is singularly focused. Like he is saying, we didn't win. It was dumb mistakes. I want to win, but I played well. The team played well. We're looking at offense. I'm only studying tape of the offense. It's not like he's studying tape like Rashid told me. If I was in a situation, I'd be looking at defensive tape and be talking to Dante Stills and be talking to the defense. I don't know if JT is doing that. I mean, be real. He's a transfer coming in, trying to see if he plays well enough, if he can salvage his career as being a top prospect years ago and get a look at the NFL. So that's doing. That's why he's there. He's not a fan of West Virginia. So I don't think he's going to want to play into the fourth quarter if they're up by 3 touchdowns either. And I don't think Neal Brown would do that to him. So I'd imagine he leaves the game earlier. I'm going to say Towson will cover that spread if it really is 37.5, just how big that spread is. I think West Virginia will still win, relatively comfortably, though. I would say maybe, I don't know. Maybe I guess my thought process is Towson maybe gets a score or two. Maybe Towson is able to put up 14 points. I think that might be the most. Maybe going off what I saw last week defensively, maybe Towson does put up 14. Maybe West Virginia puts up, gets into the 41, 37 neighborhood here. I'm just off my quick math. That's not enough of a that's not 37.5 there. So obviously, I guess I'll go in that neighborhood that West Virginia wins this 42 to 14, something like that. I mean, we're winning big. That's a big spread.
Yeah,
for a team that just they're not playing well right now. They're not very good.
Call me a homer. I don't want to see JT Daniels after the midway through the second quarter if I can have it my way.
Honestly.
And I want to see Nico play 2.5 quarters.
Okay.
I would love to see a 55-10 somewhere in that range.
Right.
But I'm going to predict 45-10. So not quite over the spread, but close. And I think it's possible they jump over that. But big enough to where I think some of the critics will go away this week, and maybe
do they go away though?
Well, some of them will go away. Like you could call me a critic this week, and I'm pretty easy to please if you're going to win. Just give me a win tomorrow. Right. So, and then we can move on to Virginia Tech and talk about that animal that is Blacksburg.
Yeah.
Some familiarity there. We'll move on to that next week.
Yeah.
Mike Asti, where can the viewers find you?
Sure. So I'm on Twitter at Mike Asti 11. That's Mike ASTI 11. Everything's there. It's pretty easy to find there. Also, of course, WVSportsNow on YouTube, all through everywhere you can find your podcast and listen if you would rather do that than watch. Also, WVSportsNow.com. I will be in Morgantown. I will have our coverage there in Morgantown. So I'll be there in the press box, and we'll have a post-game show as well, and then doing other shows with Rashid and at other places. Find me those places. Also, I do have a show personally that does talk some West Virginia sports, but more about the Pittsburgh sports region on Believe Network, and part of the Believe Network. So those are most of the key places where I think the fan base here would be interested. Sometimes I do appear on other outlets in the Pittsburgh region as well. But it's a game that obviously West Virginia, I cannot imagine anybody's thinking West Virginia is not going to win probably comfortably against Towson. We're having a whole different conversation. They don't win that game. Whole different conversation. I don't think a buyout matters. All these, they're not going to do anything mid-season, but you lose that game. That's a tough sell. The wheels have then fallen off. The sky has then fallen. But going into Blacksburg, it doesn't matter what anybody thinks of Virginia Tech. That is rough. And I think people need to remember last year when Virginia Tech fell off, West Virginia at the time had a big win, and West Virginia had a better season than Virginia Tech even at the end of last year. They almost didn't win that game. They crawled out of that game. Virginia almost blew that game. Nobody remembers that now because they did win it. They didn't.
We lived to the finish line.
They weren't impressing anybody in that win. It kind of made you feel like, okay, won the game, but they could still beat anybody or lose to anybody. And that's how the rest of
it was heaving it into the end zone at the end of that game to win.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. Virginia Tech could have won that game. Virginia Tech fans, I know this for sure. I appeared on their shows. They think they should have won. 100%. They think they should have won. They had a similar feeling to West Virginia fans after the backyard brawl.
Yeah.
That was even closer, you could argue, with West Virginia and Virginia Tech. They should have won, they got robbed, etc. And their season just went down the drain, so it's hard to argue it. But I'll tell you right now, for whether I'm going to be a part of that preview, I'll just give it to you. I think West Virginia's going to lose in Blacksburg, 100%. I had that penciled as a loss before the season started. So I thought they would probably get a 6-win season, get a mediocre bowl game again, and that would at least sell me on one more year of Neal Brown. I did say he was in the hot seat before the season and that they had to win at least 6. I thought they would barely get there. The schedule just is tougher this year than even last year. It's brutal in conference. But I thought that they would – I definitely thought they'd beat Kansas. But I thought the Virginia Tech game on the road would be a loss. And even before last year, not knowing this roster, I did think they would win the game in Morgantown and lose in Blacksburg. It's just hard to be in to play there. It really, really is.
It is.
So I had that as a loss before the season, and I'm not changing it now. I don't think it'll be a blowout. I think it'll be a good game. It's a night game, but I do think that'll likely be a Virginia Tech win in that one, and then who knows?
Just had to end it on that note.
The West Virginia should win big against Towson. They should win big against Towson. We'll see how you feel after the Towson game. And again, maybe they will show me something in the Towson game with how they win, as you said, to make people feel better and maybe less critical going into that Virginia Tech game. I mean, if they go out there and do win by 70 points or something wild, or they're up by 35 before the second quarter, and Jake didn't even have to play after the first quarter, something like that, then that might make a lot of people say, okay, that was an isolated incident against the mobile QB they can't handle, and at least if you don't have that type of offense against you the rest of the way, you'll be okay. Maybe they fix some things. We've seen West Virginia teams before go out there and upset somebody. They could still beat TCU or Baylor, and then it's not like out of the question, because they've upset teams they shouldn't beat before. But as you know, with the fan base, if they would do all that and they would beat Baylor, there will be fans that'll say, well, if you beat Baylor and you beat Virginia Tech, why couldn't you beat Kansas? And that's what
there's no doubt.
Yeah, so
and we've learned by now you just can't compare these kind of things.
Right.
It just doesn't equate mathematically. Yeah. For some reason in college football, you can't measure one win against another. It's just like Texas fans are excited because of the 20-19 Alabama game.
Yeah.
But it's going to have no bearing on the rest of their season. I mean, I just don't think it's an indicator. Is it an indicator that you've improved? Maybe. I think you get it like that.
Yeah.
But it has no bearing on wins and losses, how good you play against certain teams.
Yeah. Notre Dame was getting praised for losing to Ohio State by 11 points. Ohio State, a top 3 team. People were saying, "Oh, look at Notre Dame's." And again, I have defended them in years past. Even though they're an independent, they do play usually 3 or 4 ranked teams a year. That's always a contender. That if they win those games and they only have 1 or 2 losses, it's hard to keep them out with a schedule that's usually tougher than a lot of other teams' schedule from those Power Fives. This year, right now, just this rankings currently, they have 3 more ranked teams, at least 2, but they have several more ranked teams the rest of the season, probably end up 2 or 3. If they would have Notre Dame, they have USC. They have another one in there. They play, I think, Michigan State, maybe.
Michigan State.
Yeah. So if you would have a season where they have 1 loss and they have 2 ranked victories against top 15 teams, and the only loss is to Ohio State, who stays the number 3 team, they'd be right in there for the playoffs, certainly a New Year's Six game. But they lost to Marshall. It's all over. And it's because they played close against Ohio State, but that didn't translate to the Marshall game. They weren't good against Marshall at all. Marshall better than who they've been, but they certainly shouldn't be beating Notre Dame. So now their season's basically over for what they want to do. So you don't know week to week.
Man, it's a really good conversation with you, Mike. I can sit here and talk to you all day. Unfortunately, I have to cut it short. I have a couple things I have to do.
Yeah, me too, man. No problem.
But I really appreciate your time here. Mark Rogers appreciates your time to the channel here.
Yeah, and we all,
you're somebody I greatly respect in the community. And I think you probably hear this a lot. Don't always agree.
Sure.
But just because people don't agree with each other doesn't mean they can't be friends,
right,
and relate to each other on a professional level. So
sure.
I'm a big fan of your stuff. I think the viewers here will be a big fan of your stuff if they didn't know you beforehand, which is, to me, impossible if you follow West Virginia now. Right. So you do a wonderful job, man, and I really appreciate you for coming on.
Absolutely.
Hope you do it again in the future.
Yeah, no problem. Just let me know, man. Yeah, you're doing a good job diving into this too. Kind of off the cuff. You want to get back into it. I know you told me, asked for some advice, so I think you're doing a good job at this, especially with being out of it for so long and not doing it prior. So it's definitely harder than people think just watching along. So
it is. But I've got somebody like you to do most of the talking for me.
Well, that works for this.
Yeah. Questions, and you got it.
Well, that's also the trick too. Is feeding the right guests along there too.
Right.
Kind of play.
Absolutely. I mean, I have some other people in mind, But as far as like, I mean, outside of a Jed Drenning, there's not many people I know of that can carry a conversation as well as you can. And I mean that in a good way, you know.
Right.
You got a lot of sports knowledge. You've got a lot of experience in this field. So,
yeah.
I don't want to get too nice.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's good. We don't need to pump my tires too much. But I appreciate it, man. Absolutely.
No problem. Thanks for coming on, Mike.
All right. No problem, man. Have a good day.
And you can see us here more on the Voice of College Football on the West Virginia channel. We'll be releasing videos daily now. We're trying to grow this channel. We ask that you like and subscribe. Tell your friends about it. We'll be on here much more often from here on out. Thanks, guys.